Let's talk about the platform too. Hi, welcome to October Scaries, where I'm watching and reviewing 7 horror movies for the month of October. The Platform 2 is the sequel to The Platform. The synopsis goes that a new method tries to guarantee food from top to bottom in the pit, but taking the wrong plate can now become a death sentence unless someone rises up. Dun dun dun. The Platform 2 is a great movie if you've never seen The Platform. If you have seen The Platform, it's just average. It's not worthy as a follow up to The Platform. The Platform 2 does not hit in any of the way that the platform hits. So let us talk about it. Spoilers ahead if you haven't seen the movie, it is on Netflix. I do like that for a good chunk of the platform too, it feels like a continuation of the platform. It feels like this is the result of Goreng and Baharat's sacrifice. And the thing is, I can see Goreng becoming Dagen Bobby if he had lived. I can see him becoming this severe authoritarian because look at what Dog and Bobby is working with. Like picture like the people that we met, the inmates, the way of life that we met in the platform, and imagine trying to implement a new system in that. I can see Goring becoming like Iron Fist, like this harsh system that I'm implementing is worth it because Goring and Baharat were going around killing people in the name of what they were trying to do, in the name of the message, in the name of hope. So I can very easily give Goring story that we watch play out in the platform. I can easily make that, I can easily make that Doug and Bobby's backstory. So I think Goring would be fueled by we're not going back. This is still better than what we had. That fewer and fewer people are starving on the bottom levels. We are making improvements. We are moving forward. We are reforming the system. And for that reason, I'm going to keep these super harsh punishments for people screwing up. However, although I like the twist that this is a prequel, I do think that this movie being a prequel ultimately reveals a huge weakness. Why was it important for Shimagasi to be in this movie? Because it messes the timeline up in a way that doesn't make any sense. Why is there no memory of this revolution in the platform? Shimagasi doesn't say anything. When Goring suggests like, hey, let's talk to the people above us and they'll talk to the people above us so that like we can make sure like people only take like what they're owed, the thing that they asked for. All Shimagasi says, because I went back and me and Janine and Jennifer, we went back and watched like the first few minutes of the first movie. Shimagasi's response is, are you a communist? But nothing about like, I've seen this before. Trimagasi was our exposition character for those first few scenes, just like the Frenchman was in this movie to tell us what is going on, what is the status, what is the history. Like he told us about Maharu and her kid, but nothing about a revolution that happened before. Imogiri didn't know anything about it. Baharat didn't know anything about a revolution that happened that destroyed a previous system. Everybody just reacted to Goring like what he was saying was crazy, but not crazy in the sense of like, hey, we've been here before and it didn't work. That's a big like screw up to me, and it's baffling because it's like you're writing a prequel, so you know what happens next after the prequel. You know the extent of information that your characters have, but post prequel. But I feel like this movie, the inclusion of Trimagasi and Baharat to a lesser extent, didn't factor in what they knew and didn't know in the first movie. It's a gap for me, and it is a gap that bothers me. Second thing is that I very recently watched the platform, like I said, very recently watched it for the first time. I will say that, after watching the platform too, I don't think having us relearn, despite how fresh it is in my mind, I still don't think having us relearn the platform via 2 new characters this time was the right way to go. Like we're essentially relearning the same information. How many levels are there and all that stuff? And granted, like it's been a more than a year for a lot of people who originally watched the platform when it came out, but I don't like, we essentially took the same point of view, the same idea, which I'll get to, because I do think the idea of like reform works, but the new characters, and this time having it being two new people via Parampon and Tamyasin, I think it's Zamyatin. I don't think it didn't work for me once the movie was over and I was like reviewing everything in my mind. That didn't work for me. I think if anything, they should have done it the exact same way, because they did a lot of the exact same thing in this movie. If they're insistent on having a new person, they should have at least put another person in there who knew what the system was. Having the exposition come from the level above as opposed to the person who's in the same level as Parampon. Parampon is not an interesting character. This movie did something different from the first, which is that it gave us more details about the main character, and I don't quite think that worked. Like, Parampon had a personal journey that she was on in the midst of this chaotic mess happening. Parampon is ultimately a character who makes bad decisions and is destined to bring about destruction, because first she weirdly like ignored warnings and got a child killed with her little art installation, and then she destroyed an entire fragile ecosystem inside of the pit. I actually rewrote a summary of the platform too, to just show another angle of like what it's about, featuring Parampon and her journey. So Parampon bonded with her roommate Zamyatin, so she lied about him eating extra food in order to protect him. But Zamyatin, who is weak-willed in every way, couldn't handle the threat of punishment, and so he deleted himself. That made Parampon angry, so when the nameless woman said, "Let's go punish some people," she said, "Let's do it." She learns about Dagen Babi's cruelty, then experiences it. So after the nameless woman dies, she meets Trimgasi, who is just an evil man. Like, it turns out, like, it's just Trimgasi, like the way he looks, that little old man actor is like the picture of sniveling, destructive old man. Like, he is flat out disgusting in this movie. So she meets Trimgasi and is like, "Hey, let's ruin everything." So leads her own revolution and destroys the ecosystem. But at the last minute, she wants to redeem herself for getting that little boy killed, that personal thing she had going on. So she abandons her vague plan of escape in order to help a hallucination, and then she dies. That's another summary of what happens in the platform too. I don't think this thing of like going deeper into like what's driving the characters was a good idea. They did it with Parampon, they did it with Zamyatin, and I actually prefer the way the platform did it, where we knew why they were there, little quick story, found out why Imogiri was there, etc., and then we moved on, and the movie was about this system. I actually think the main character of this movie should have been the nameless woman. We did the whole like follow a new person in the first movie. This movie, the main character should have been someone who's already been in the pit, understands the system, is explaining it to someone new, but we are following them. And I will say right here that I don't understand why the nameless woman, who had all this backstory and had the more interesting story of like wanting revenge and like, you know, she bugged the system without knowing it, started the cult. She's a much more interesting character than Parampon. I don't know why she didn't get a name. This movie did not answer the number one question that I had after watching the first movie, which is like, what is the qualification to get into the vertical self-management system? Why do they take everybody and anybody? And now after watching the prequel, I actually have a second question, which is, what is the PR that the vertical self-management system has out there in the real world? Because these people are signing up, they are excited to tell these people the one meal that they want. So that's the bad. Let's move on to the good, because the movie did have a lot of good aspects. So number one, I think that this series, now we can call it, or you know, this duology, whatever, is overall pessimistic, which I like. Both movies show the futility of trying to change a violent system. Like, I think the overall message of both movies is that it's futile, you're not gonna get anywhere. Because this movie shows that it's a cycle that is happening, where like someone comes in, tries to change it, they lose their lives, and maybe like something new, something gets implemented, a change, but it's short lasting, and they fall right back into like chaos and debauchery and everybody for themselves. So I do like that. I do like that message, even though it is pessimistic. Essentially, the system always wins. The administration always wins. It won in the first movie. It won in this one. It's won with the little messiahs that we had in between Perampuan and Goreng. And honestly, I'm honestly not sure if those two people we saw actually occurred was like timeline order, if it's just to show that like there have been other people. The inmates exist under too much pressure to trust a new system. So the other thing that I like is that the movement of solidarity that was happening, the revolution of solidarity, was still young. It was still brand new. We saw that the inmates were still trying to communicate the message to the people in the levels below. They were still trying to get people to trust the system, to trust that, hey, it's okay. You can't survive on just your share that you asked for, and also trying to get people to trust in each other, and absent of the fact that they trust each other, because they don't, that's where the punishment comes in. I did of course notice that the people who keep messing up the system are the new people who get in and are like, hey, someone ate my food, like I'm just gonna eat whatever I want. And I think that because the system, the self-management system, is so new and so fragile, is why the anointed ones were imposing such harsh punishments. And again, Dog and Bobby, we got no backstory on him aside from what was relevant to that nameless woman. I would have loved to know about Dog and Bobby, since he was our main like kind of villain. I will say he's a product of the pit. He is a product of that harsh environment. And so he was ruling with an iron fist. It sucks. It's irrational. Because the thing is that the loyalists call people who eat the food, who break the law, barbarians. But the system that the anointed ones have created and are maintaining is barbaric. The punishments are barbaric. It's one thing to be like, you can't eat the food of anyone who's passed away. We won't redistribute. We're just going to throw it in the trash. That's ill-advised, because these people are hungry. Some people only ask for a plum as the food that they can eat for the rest of their time in there. But again, like, I would love to hear how it's pitched to these people, because why would you pick a fruit? But anyways, why would you pick croquettes? But punishing people for feeding the hungry, punishing nameless roommate, punishing them for feeding someone who was emaciated because they were on the lower level, so ill-advised. And so I like that they created a pressure cooker inside of a pressure cooker because of these punishments, right? And so I like that there were a subset of people who were just ready to rebel against it. This harsh condition breeds disloyalty, but also it shows that like there are some people who just want more than their fair share. They think they're better because they were here first. They think they should have more just because they're stronger, just because they know the place better. And so for that reason, they will hop on the platform to break everything. And I will say that this being the prequel furthers my stance from the first movie that the message does need a bearer. Because in the first movie, I think Goreng was told that the message doesn't need a bearer. Yes, it does. Because look at how Dog and Bobby's society is lost to memory because of a continuity error. But like nobody like remembers, because I'm just saying the message needs a bearer. I also like I teased before, the mythologizing of activists / revolutionaries. Whoever that person was a regular human being. Like, we all know this, but somehow they have been stripped of their humanity. They've been stripped of the fear that, like we saw Goreng, right? The fear they must have experienced, the hesitation, the pain, everything. They sanitize this person, quite frankly, for their own benefit. Like, to give them, like, that person being a regular human being is not enough to give them hope. They stripped them of humanity, and made them bigger than they are, made them a symbol, in order to go on. But I also wonder if that story is completely made up. right? If it's something that the anointed ones created in order to justify their power. Because there's also a story in here about, power corrupts, corrupted leaders. But that's just something like to consider. I do believe there actually was a person just because like that's exactly what we saw Goring do. Last, almost last, the children. I believe that the children are allegories for hope. Again, the movie just gave us a bunch of children, didn't tell us if they're in the pit, why are they there? So I'm going to say they're not in the pit. They are representations, they are visual representations of hope. And lastly, I want to share some quotes that stood out to me. I do think this movie had more standout quotes than the first one. So the first quote being, freedom doesn't mean being able to eat whatever you want. I thought that was good. This is not a direct quote, but the Frenchman also said, no one respects a law that's applied unequally. Basically, I like that, especially for the pit. The higher up you are, the more responsibility. Love that too. And then Daniel Bobby had a really good quote, I feel, especially to explain his state of mind, which is in the anointed one's point of view, which is if you let someone break the law for a so-called righteous cause, they'll find another reason to break the law. Okay. Those are my thoughts on the Platform 2. Not as good as the first one. Very average. I give it a 3 out of 5. If you've seen the Platform 2, let me know what you think, and I will see you for the next one.